Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, March 11th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. Before we get started, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. South Korea's Prime Minister has given the green light for people aged 65 and older to receive AstraZeneca's COVID-19 shots. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will be visiting South Korea for the first time next Wednesday to meet with their South Korean counterparts in Seoul for 2+2 talks. And amid continuing violence in Myanmar, the United States launched additional sanctions against the country, and the UN Security Council agreed on a statement to strongly condemn the military junta. It's now official. The vaccine made by AstraZeneca has now been approved by the country's expert committee on the vaccination program for adults aged 65 and above. Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun announced the details this morning, along with a plan to secure more doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine by the second quarter. Our Chang Tae-hyun is standing by to tell us more. On the line for us. Tae-hyun.
Hi, Mo-gyan. The AstraZeneca vaccine can now be given to people who are 65 and above. Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun at a conference on Thursday said the decision comes after an expert meeting on Wednesday. The vaccine's safety and efficacy had already been verified about a month ago, but at the time, there wasn't enough clinical data for senior residents. That meant those aged 65 and above were excluded from receiving the vaccine after the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety said such a move should be considered carefully. However, a recent study out of the UK has shown the AstraZeneca vaccine is effective for older people, and various European countries like Germany and Italy have approved it for older age groups. The Prime Minister added that enough doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine for 3.5 million people will arrive by June. He said it's time to speed up the vaccination process, urging health authorities to give the vaccine to as many people as possible in the first half of the year. That's all I've got, and I'll be back with more.
Thank you for that, Tae-hyun. Do keep us updated. Now, South Korea reported 465 new cases of COVID-19 on Thursday, remaining above the 400 mark for the third straight day. Now, of the new cases, 444 were locally transmitted, with 21 from overseas. There were 4 more deaths, raising the death toll to 1,652. And with this, South Korea's total caseload is now over 94,000. And as of midnight Wednesday, more than 51,000 people in South Korea received their first dose of the vaccine, bringing the total number of people inoculated to over 500,000. There were no additional deaths post-inoculation. With Israel vaccinating more than 50% of its population, the country is now seeing a significant dip in its daily COVID-19 figures. Meanwhile, the EU has struck a deal for more Pfizer vaccines, and Portugal has lifted restrictions on the use of AstraZeneca vaccines on elderly people. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
Among all the countries that have begun mass vaccination programs, Israel has been by far the most aggressive in its campaign, having vaccinated more per capita than any other country in the world. Having surpassed its 5 millionth vaccination jab this week, Israel has inoculated 54% of its population. Among its 9.3 million population, 42% have also received their second dose. With a large number of Israel's population getting vaccinated, the number of serious cases of COVID-19 as well as the transmission rate are both continuing to fall. According to the nation's health ministry on Tuesday, the virus reproduction number has fallen to 0.95%. The European Commission on Wednesday announced it has reached an agreement with Pfizer-BioNTech for 4 million more doses in the next 2 weeks in hopes to tackle virus hotspots and to facilitate free border movement. These doses will be delivered before the end of the month and will come on top of the schedule of deliveries currently agreed between the drug makers and the member states. In Europe, Portugal's health authorities on Wednesday announced they have approved the use of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine for those over 65. The decision comes against the backdrop of new studies revealing its effectiveness in preventing infection and lowering hospitalization among the elderly. With this, all adults in the country can now receive the shot, with other vaccines currently being used in the country being those developed by Pfizer and Moderna. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Top officials from Washington are visiting Seoul next week. The Secretaries of State and Defense will hold talks with their South Korean counterparts. This comes as the Biden administration may soon conclude reviewing its North Korea policies. Our Hong-Yu has this story.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will be visiting South Korea for the first time next Wednesday. Both are not only scheduled to meet with their Korean counterparts in Seoul, but will be holding a 2+2 meeting, where Foreign Minister Chung Eui-yong and his U.S. counterpart Blinken, as well as Defense Ministers Hogue and his U.S. counterpart Austin will be taking part as well. They are likely to discuss the situation on the Korean peninsula, including denuclearization, as well as peace and security of the Indo-Pacific region, COVID-19 countermeasures, and regional to global affairs. A meeting of this type has not been held for 5 years, but the Blue House says that it is symbolic of the strong alliance between the two countries. The top office said it is also making arrangements for talks between President Moon Jae-in and the two U.S. secretaries. A high-ranking official from the Blue House told reporters Wednesday that the Biden administration is unlikely to take long in finishing its review on its North Korea policies. This is because the Biden administration has already named Sung Kim, former U.S. ambassador to Korea, as the acting assistant secretary of state for East Asian and Pacific affairs. The source said that Washington had asked Seoul for its opinion on North Korean policy when the review first got underway. South Korea has in response advised the U.S. of what it has in mind to achieve denuclearization and over what timetable. The official said the U.S. is likely to incorporate their ideas into its North Korean policies, which could be completed by next month at the earliest. Hong-Yu, Arirang News.
The commander of the U.S. Forces Korea says the threat posed by North Korea persists as the regime continues to pursue a nuclear arsenal and other weapons of mass destruction. Now, despite that, he stressed the U.S. is ready to defend South Korea against any adversary that threatens the country. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
The chief of the USFK is warning that North Korea is showing no sign of halting its nuclear development and continues to pose a grave threat to the U.S. and South Korea. In a statement submitted to a U.S. House Armed Services Committee hearing on Washington's defense posture in the Indo-Pacific region, General Robert Abrams also stressed that U.S. forces in Korea stand ready to defend South Korea from any threat. The hearing was the first of its kind since the Biden administration took office and comes amid an ongoing review by the U.S. Department of Defense on its global defense posture. Pointing out that there have been no intercontinental ballistic missile or nuclear tests since 2017, the statement highlighted that the threat from Pyongyang continues to persist. He also noted that the regime did not show any signs of movement towards denuclearization. Rather, he stated that the regime is showcasing new capabilities, including the unveiling of a new type of submarine-launched ballistic missile, along with a new solid-propellant ballistic missile during its recent military parade in recognition of the 8th Party Congress. Abrams also underscored that the Combined Forces Command of South Korea and the United States remains fully ready to counter any aggression from North Korea. Referring to the annual joint military exercise between the allies, he said adjustments had been made over the past few years to provide room for diplomacy with the North, but stressed such modifications have not stopped them training. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said the U.S. is not willing to allow the release of the Iranian funds that have been locked in South Korea. The high-ranking diplomat told the House Foreign Relations Committee on Wednesday local time that Washington will not ease any of its sanctions on Iran, including the return of about $7 billion unless Iran returns to compliance with a 2015 nuclear agreement. Earlier this year, the South Korean government announced it was ready to release a part of frozen money if the U.S. agreed. As violence continues to escalate in Myanmar, the U.S. has imposed additional sanctions on Myanmar's military in response to its deadly crackdown on peaceful protesters. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has also agreed on a presidential statement to strongly condemn the military's increasing use of violence. Our Choi Min-jung reports.
The United States has launched additional sanctions on Myanmar in a bid to intensify pressure on the military as it continues its deadly crackdown. According to a statement released by the U.S. Treasury Department on Wednesday, the U.S. sanctioned 2 adult children of Myanmar's military leader Min Aung Hlaing, along with 6 companies controlled by the two. The Treasury noted that the actions come in response to the brutal killing of peaceful protesters in Myanmar. It also urged for the immediate release of civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and the president, who have been detained by the military. On the same day, the UN Security Council agreed on a statement to strongly condemn the military junta. Approved unanimously by the 15-member body, the statement calls for the military to exercise utmost restraint and stresses its support for democracy and human rights in the country. It added that it strongly opposes violence against peaceful protesters, including women, youths, and children. Although the extent of the denunciation was taken down a notch due to opposition by China, Russia, India, and Vietnam, watchers say the statement well reflects the Council's efforts to reverse the coup. The moves from the US and the UN come as violence continues to escalate in Myanmar. On Wednesday, military forces fired tear gas and rubber bullets at protesters in 2 districts of Yangon. More than 100 people were arrested. According to Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, more than 60 protesters have been killed and some 2,000 people detained since the military took over on February 1st. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
March 11, 2011, Japan experienced the biggest recorded earthquake in its history, followed by a tsunami that caused a nuclear plant meltdown. Fukushima was devastated by radioactive materials. Now, 10 years have passed, but experts say the area won't fully recover for decades. Our Kim Sang-min provides a deeper analysis.
On March 11, 2011, a powerful earthquake and tsunami rocked Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, changing the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. The tsunami that hit the region killed almost 16,000 people, and more than 2,500 are still missing. As many as 470,000 people were pushed into shelters without any idea if they'll ever be able to return home. The earthquake and tsunami shut down the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant's cooling systems, and tons of radioactive material leaked into the air and sea. 10 years on, the region is still recovering. Most people have never returned, and the few who came back are still living in the aftermath of tragedy.
We have not recovered at all. There is still vacant land. So there's nothing to see in Fukushima Prefecture. It's true, and only a few people have come back.
If the earthquake and tsunami hadn't happened, I would have been able to spend more time with my old friends.
The Japanese government has been claiming that the site is under control, safe enough for some Olympic events to be held nearby. But the latest findings by Greenpeace still show a tremendous amount of radioactivity in the region.
This region is a very large region. And so what we found is that only a small fraction of the area that they said they've decontaminated compared with the larger area, which is still contaminated. So it's about 15% of this particular zone, which is about 800 square kilometers. So about 100 kilometers they've decontaminated, but the majority, 85%, still has had no decontamination efforts at all. And even where they have done decontamination, the results are varied, from reducing radiation levels significantly to actually having almost no.
Former residents are still in a painful fight with the government, as they've been indirectly forced to return back to the region through cuts to financial and housing support.
They just tell us it's okay and that we should just come back. What if another disaster occurs? Never mind the threat from earthquakes, those reactors could blow up if someone just drops a tool in the wrong place.
10 years have passed, but experts say that several more decades are required for a full recovery. But true recovery can come only when the Japanese government becomes transparent and open about the situation in Fukushima.
The Japanese government must be honest, and at the same time, for all concerned citizens, activists, and I would argue government, they need to challenge the Japanese government to stop any future pollution, including of the Pacific Ocean, from contaminated water.
Kim Sang-min, Arirang News.
Good morning. Those of us in western regions are trapped under very high levels of toxic smog with an ultrafine dust advisory issued for the capital region as well as the Chungcheongnam-do and Jeollabuk-do provinces today. Also, emergency fine dust reduction measures are in place for the capital region as well. And it looks to be another very mild afternoon with highs in the mid to upper teens across the country. Seoul will make it to 16 degrees Celsius. Jeju and Gwangju will be topping out at 18 degrees, while rain will start from Jeju and Jeollado provinces from this evening. In South Coast and Jeju will receive 20 to 60 millimeters of rainfall into Friday evening before gradually spreading to rest of the South tomorrow. Central regions, however, will not be seeing some much-needed rainfall to clear the dust from the air. Rather, we'll be under cloudy to partly sunny skies through next Monday, with warmer than average temperatures to continue for the time being. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that will do it for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back with more of the day's headlines at noon Korea time, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching.
Beginning on February 15th, the social distancing level in the Seoul metropolitan area is lowered to 2, and the rest of the country is lowered to 1.5. Restaurants and coffee shops in the Seoul metropolitan area may open until 10 p.m.